Sacramento at 1320 Kings insider James Ham and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham. I think the Kings match up well against Denver. I think that's my other thing is I'm looking at teams that match up well. I was thinking about this morning, and because I'm planning for the playoffs here, guys.
That's what you got to do.
I was thinking, like, who do I not want the Kings to play? I was like, man, I feel like the Kings match up well against Denver. I can't say that about Milwaukee, and I cannot say that about Boston. Now, to be fair, I don't think I could say that about Memphis either. But for some reason, I think they match up well against Denver.
I don't know if you can say that about the Clippers either.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I can't. James, what do you think of all of this?
I like Denver. I think they got a lot of nice pieces.
Do you see them as like a legit, like this team can win the NBA championship?
Maybe not, but I don't think I believe that of any team in the Western Conference. Like that's kind of how this season feels. You know, I think Philadelphia, I think Boston, Milwaukee, like there's a lot of tough teams in the East, and I think the balance of power has shifted pretty heavily. But I still like Denver. I do. I mean, you got to worry that they're a team that really knows how to win in the regular season, but when you get to the playoffs, they don't. Especially, you know, with a player like Jokic, who's so good in the regular season, but, you know, teams are going to try to isolate him on, you know, a possession by possession situation. They've got good length, though. Like length, athleticism. Yeah, they're physical. They've got some shooters. Yeah. I mean, I think they can use a little bit more shooters, a little bit more scoring. But, yeah, overall, I like them.
I'm trying to think. I think they did. They played the last two playoffs without Jamal Murray, right? Because the one against Phoenix, he got hurt that year. And he didn't play last year, did he?
No.
Yeah. So, the last two playoffs have been without Jamal Murray. So,
Yeah. I think they're a good squad.
What do you think about I'll give you two other teams, James, while we're here talking about the league. What do you think about Cleveland and the Clippers? I think the Clippers, I still say what I said at the beginning of the season. I think they're going to the NBA Finals. And they're starting to play really good basketball with the guys coming back and things of that nature. And then we were talking about teams because the question was, are we kind of overrating Boston and Milwaukee, thinking nobody can mess with those guys? And I named a number of different teams. And I think Cleveland is in that group that in a 7-game series, I think I could absolutely see them beating Boston or Milwaukee in a 7-game series. Wouldn't favor them, but I could see it happening.
Yeah, I just don't think that they are there yet with experience. Like maybe they could beat one of those teams, but you're not going to beat both. So like that's where I would put it. Like I have a tough time. I mean, who knows? Like stranger things have happened for sure. But when you look at the battle-tested teams in the Eastern Conference that, you know, have been basically taking turns going to the finals or, you know, playing each other in the Eastern Conference finals, like those top three teams are just really, really good. And as far as the Clippers, like, look, they have to actually like do something before I will say that I fear them at all. Like, are they a good team? Do they have good players? Yes, but, you know, they haven't proven that they can win anything. And it doesn't matter how long. I mean, what are we in year 4 of the Kawhi and Paul George like situation? And they've dealt with injuries, they've dealt with all kinds of things, but like that doesn't mean we're not going to see more injuries from Kawhi Leonard in the second half of the season. You know, there's murmurs about them buying out John Wall if he doesn't get moved at the deadline. I like their team, but I don't love it. And you know, maybe they do have better depth than a lot of teams in the West, but I'm just not super impressed with the West. I mean, I've said it a couple of times here, like the Kings are pacing for like 46, 47 wins and they're the 3rd seed. That shows you that the West is down. And, you know, and that's not to take anything away from what the Kings have done, but I don't think there's such parity where everyone is losing to everybody and it's just like, oh, this is such a strong conference. That's not what I'm looking at right now. I think it's a pretty big mess.
You kind of poo-pooed on the scoring record last week. You didn't seem to be very excited for it. Did you watch it last night? Were you moved by it? Were you caught up in the historic moment? or did you maintain your stance from last week where you just did not care?
Yeah, I kind of maintained the stance. Did I watch some of the clips? Did I watch some of the clips? Sure.
You didn't watch the game?
No,
Hammer.
I even saw it on replay this morning, and I was like, do I want to watch that, or what do I want to watch Man U and Leeds? And I ended up watching Man U and Leeds. And so, yeah, I just like, hey, I get it. I get it. It was a great. It was a great moment. I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, hey, it was inevitable, and he's going to keep playing for another 2 or 3 years. So like the scoring record is going to be so far out ahead of everybody. I mean, look, he's incredible. He's a basketball savant, and he's been amazing. He's one of the few players who has ever lived up to the hype.
Is he the greatest of all time?
No, he's not the greatest of all time. Like, I don't think so.
Who is?
Where is he?
Oh, I've got Jordan at number 1, and I've got Wilt at number 2, and then LeBron is probably number 3. But where's Kareem?
Yeah.
I don't know. He's in the top 10. But like Mount Rushmore, but see, like scoring, it's just one aspect of the game, and LeBron has stuffed the stat sheet, and Kareem was great at, he's a great rebounder and a very, very good defensive player. Like, these are great players for sure, but like, I'd like to tell you, like, Tom Brady is like the greatest quarterback in the NFL. I mean, we've got to that point now where in NFL history, you have to give it to him. Like, he's the best winner that we've ever seen. He's put up like tremendous stats, but beyond the stats go all the championships. Like, Jordan won 6 and 8 years, and the only reason he didn't win the other 2 is because he retired. Like, he's the greatest winner, and to me, like, the greatest player I've ever seen. And I'll also say this, like, we're in an era where I can honestly tell you that, like, the way that Jordan changed the game was immense, right? Like, they rewrote the record books because of him, like the rules to the game because of him. And we saw Kobe really take advantage of those rules. We saw T-Mac take advantage of those rules. But during this era right here that we're in, the most impactful player in the game who has changed the game the most during the last decade, it's not LeBron. It's Steph Curry. He's completely changed how the game is played. And so, like, is LeBron great? Yes. Is Steph better than LeBron? No. But, like, impact on the game and everything else, like, that's why I look at Wilt. That's why I look at Michael. Like, I just think that they changed the game more. And LeBron's kind of a throwback.
Kareem changed the game more than Wilt did.
Maybe.
As Kenny pointed out earlier, they changed rules in basketball. You can't dunk at UCLA in college basketball because of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as Kenny pointed out earlier, went like 8 years without losing a basketball game.
Nobody can beat. And here's the one thing I'll say about that, James. You're not you, because you're not the only one that feels this way. I'm just saying, like, when you make the argument that he didn't change the game and everything, it's almost like you're penalizing LeBron James for being an alien. Like, he didn't change the game because nobody can be LeBron James. And that shouldn't be something that, and I'm not saying you're doing it, but takes away from who he is as a legendary figure. Like,
well, I'll repackage what you're saying. That's it.
People can beat Steph.
There. Yep.
Like, you don't have to be tall or, super quick or something like that. All you have to do is keep working on shooting the ball, and that changes the game. The reason why LeBron didn't change the game is because you can't be him. As much as you work on your game, you can't be.
I get that,
30, and that shouldn't be used as a negative against LeBron.
I'm not using it as a negative against LeBron. I just, and the other thing I'll tell you, like, the only years that he really had a team put around him is his championship years in Miami. Like, you go back to his Cavs days, and those teams were such trash. He had Mo Williams as the second best player for a long time. He had Zydrunas Ilgauskas. So I don't want to take away from him as like a champion and things like that. But again, like his championships, they come like with 2 other like superstar level players. And then on top of that, all kinds of role players that just like, hey, I'm in, let's join in.
Hey, look up Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman for me. Jesse, pull up those stats. Why do we do this? Why do we do this?
No. I can tell you that the big three that Jordan had was like in the first three championships. Like, who was it? Was it Horace Grant? Was it like who
Scottie
was it? That,
Pippen.
well,
Who
Scottie
was
Pippen
voted one of
and
the 50 greatest players of all time.
well, yeah, but come on now, like Dwayne Wade is going to be right there as well. Like Pippen was great for sure, and Rodman, like for the 2 or 3 seasons that they were able to rein him in, was incredible as well. But we're not talking about you going out and getting one of the top 5 players or 8 players or 10 players in the league.
You are
Rodman,
grossly misremembering Scottie Pippen.
Oh no, with Pippen for sure, but Rodman, no. Like I love Rodman. Rodman's one of my favorite players ever, but he still wasn't like a top 15 player in the league. He's a great rebounder and a great defender, but again, he's not like of the level of a Chris Bosh at that time. You know, if Chris Bosh wouldn't have had the blood clotting issues and stuff. So
I'll say it to both of you guys' point. Pippen was better than Wade and Bosh. So there's that. But Pippen's better than Wade. He better than Wade. But and he definitely better than Chris Bosh. That's just no question. But at the same time, look at the other components that Michael Jordan played with. I mean, he won championships with Luke Longley and Bill Wennington and Ron Harper at the end of his career where he could barely move. John Paxson.
Ron Harper won 5 championships with him. Overall, I think he won 2 with the Lakers after the Bulls runs.
Yeah.
And Ron Harper was a 20-plus per game scorer all through his career until he went to the Bulls and was told, like, we need you to be a great defender. I mean, I get it, like Randy Brown, and like they had players, right, that weren't great, but who played major roles. Even like Steve Kerr, who won, like, he was on so many championship teams, is ridiculous. There's a point.
I'm sorry for doing this. Y'all, Steven said Wade won a championship without another superstar. I'm sorry. What championship are you referring to?
Yeah, man.
The
Shaq Fu.
O'Neal came to town? Y'all are wild, boy. Oh my gosh. Y'all are
wild. No, I that's not what I'm saying. And I'd also say this. Wade was great without some of the other players that he needed to win championships, but he was still great.
Was really
Pippen wasn't great without Michael. Like afterwards.
That's cap, James. That's cap.
You think Pippen was great without Michael?
Scottie Pippen went, and the year Pippen was gone, he was like the top 3 player in the world, and he was a bad Hubert Davis call away from beating a team that went to the NBA Finals in a 7-game series. Scottie Pippen was extraordinary the year Michael Jordan was gone. And then,
but what about all the other years after he left Jordan and wasn't great?
When he went to the Western Conference Finals and was 12 minutes away from going to the NBA Finals?
He was really good. He was not great. He didn't live up to the hype or the contract. So I don't know. I really like Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen's a really, really good second player, right? On a
player on that team. Now that I think about it, that
Portland
was it Rasheed? It's probably Rasheed, huh?
Yeah, they probably had a lot of talent. That's just
Rasheed, Steve Smith. I think Sabonis, Scotty. I think
who was the one that you just said?
Sabonis.
Oh, the other Sabonis. I was like, bro, who? I'm thinking, who is he trying to say?
Sam, the white guy on the bench.
What is Kenny trying to say here? I'm trying to save him. Oh yeah, that's Sabonis. Gotcha.
Yeah, I can, like in his last like 5-6 years, Scotty capped out when he left the Bulls. He capped out at 14.5 points a game. Like, was he still a really good functional player? Yeah, he was. He was still a good defender and all that stuff. But I'm just saying, like, he's a player that had the benefit of the doubt, the benefit of playing with a great player, and
Dennis Rodman once averaged 18.7 rebounds in a season.
Yeah, but what did he average point-wise? Like 6?
9, 7, 4, 7, 5. But every year from his 5th year on, he averaged double-digit rebounds, and some of these numbers are absurd, like 18,
Absurd.
20,
Yeah.
17, 16, 14, 16, 15. Last year in the league, 38 years old, averaged 14 rebounds per game.
Jeez.
I remember watching him in an All-Star game when he was with the Pistons, and he went up to block a shot, and like his arm was almost at the top of the, I mean, his hand was at like almost at the top of the backboard, and put one about like 30 rows deep, like just having a good time, like springs in his legs. What he could do at like 6'7", absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved Rodman, loved him.
Yeah.
Me and James see virtually everything in life very, very differently. Just so differently.
That's fine.
I think LeBron James is the greatest player we've ever seen.
I'm still torn. I haven't figured it out yet. I don't know.
It's funny. You've changed your mind so many
I know.
times.
I don't know. I'm still torn.
And I'll repeat this for people who are just tuning in. You don't have to have an answer today. You don't have to have an answer ever.
No, I need to have an answer by the trade deadline. By noon tomorrow, I need to have an answer.
Speaking of the trade deadline, James, the Sacramento Kings made their first of many monster deals. Heading into tomorrow, I believe it's at noon, is the trade deadline. Kessler Donovan Edwards, who's actually in Houston with the team right now. Tell us a little bit about this deal, why it got done, how it got done, and what it may or may not mean.
Yeah, this is an interesting trade. Look, this is why they cleared out a roster spot, so they could actually do deals like this, where you took back a bunch of cash, you took back a player that you can kick the tires on, but we don't know whether he'll be on the roster by the end of the week or not. Like, there's no way to like predict whether he'll be on the roster. He's 22 years old. He becomes the second youngest player on the team outside of Keegan Murray, and I think he's 10 days older than Keegan. But 6'8", 6'11" wingspan, more of a three, has barely played at all this season. And Brooklyn had this situation where before the Kyrie trade, they were at 185 million as far as a cap. They dropped to like 180 million with that trade, but that still puts them like roughly 30 million over the luxury tax. So by trading Kessler Edwards, they saved themselves about $8 million in salary cap and in luxury tax. And that's what it was for Brooklyn. Whether he can play or not, we have no idea. I mean, he's a Pepperdine kid, so he didn't play at a major, huge university.
Wow, that's it, Doug Christie.
Yeah, I reached out to Doug. Doug likes him. Doesn't really know him. They were waiting to see him, kind of get him in and see what he looks like when he's in your gym, and physically, like how he kind of matches up. But this is kind of like the equivalent of like KZ Okpala. I don't think it's a game changer by any stretch of the imagination. It gives them more depth, but even saying that, like this team shouldn't be done. Like, we're watching a Western Conference arms race, and if your big move is to go out and add Kessler Edwards, who probably won't even play for you really this season, and is more of an ad for the G League than he is for the parent club, then I don't think you had a good trade deadline.
There's some discussion in the chatty house about the trade exception. I thought they used it in this deal. Did they not use the trade exception?
They had a $1.63 million trade exception from the Marvin Bagley trade as well. So that's what they used. So when you do these deals,
But they had two.
They had two of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They have two. They have that, and they have a $4 million. It's like 4.02 million.
Didn't that expire? Did that expire yesterday?
It expires today. Yep. It's February 8th. So it's one.
A year from the deal. Sorry.
Yeah. It's a year from the deal. So yeah, it expires today, and whether they use that or not, we don't know at this point, but they don't have a roster spot. I also point out that like Kessler Edwards might not be the guy that they waive if they do need to open up another roster spot. Like, they have other players that they can waive. They're on guaranteed contracts, but they have a bunch of guys who are on like league minimum deals, whether it's Dellavedova or KZ or Chimezie Metu, any of those guys. So if they need to clear roster spots, they can without any problem. But this one here was more of and I don't fault a team for doing a cash grab. It's literally the reason why you open up that roster spot was to be able to do something like this, where you're able to get a little bit of asset. And they sent out a player that, to be honest with you, I didn't even know they had. I had gone through and looked and seen who they had, like the draft rights to, and they have like Luka Mitrovic that Vlade chose with the last pick in the 2019 draft, or 20. I'm not sure, whichever, the Kyle Guy, Justin James draft. So I thought that they would deal one of those, but apparently they picked up this other guy in the Marvin Bagley trade last year as far as the rights. And so the reason why he was sent out is you're not allowed to take on something for nothing in the NBA. So either you have to send out a future protected pick, or you have to send out the draft rights to some rando who's playing in France and is 28 years old and has never played in the NBA. So that's why they added him in.
I'm so happy you said that. I was never going to admit this on the show. I had no clue who that person was.
Y'all didn't know?
No. Only basketball minds like Kenny Caraway. I was like, I do not know who this person is, but I'm never going to admit it. But since James admitted it first, I'll just acknowledge I didn't know what that was.
He's a second round pick in 2016. Yeah, and he's switched hands a few times since then.
So when you talk about
switched jobs since then, I can't remember that.
When you talk about going for money grab or cash considerations and stuff like that, I want to make sure I know that's money that goes towards the cap, right?
No,
is it money for the organization?
No, it's like a golf check. They just walk out with a big bag of cash. So and again, I don't fault them for, if they need more cash to go do another deal. When they take on that deal, it used to be this is crazy. This is, just so you know, this is going back to Maloof days. The Maloofs would trade players and take back cash, but they would require that the other team actually pay the entire year salary of the player they were sending out before they got to Sacramento. And then on top of that, spend cash, right? The NBA killed that loophole because, again, the Maloofs ran a $58 million payroll, but of that $58 million, they probably got $2 or $3 million back to save somebody else cap space. And then on top of that, someone else paid salaries for some of the players. So they could even set up when you traded Francisco Garcia to the Houston Rockets, where the players you got back, their salaries were already paid for. And then Francisco, you didn't pay his salary. He went there and they covered his salary as well. And then on top of that, they got money back. And so that used to be a loophole for the Kings to make a bunch of money. In this situation, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a team was saving $8 million in luxury tax. They covered his salary and probably $1 million or $2 million more. There's a cap on how much money you can take back now, and I think it's $3 million, and that goes for all of your deals. $3 million is a cap, and which we ran into with the Papagiannis deal, where Brandon Williams tried to sneak Papagiannis into one of those weird trades at the last second, and the Jazz and the Cavs. So that's what the George Hill deal. They tried to dump Papagiannis in that, and the other teams are like, look, man, we're not taking Papagiannis onto our roster and then waiving him because you owe him money next year. So instead, the Cavs and the Jazz combined to give the Kings enough salary to cover Papagiannis's deal for the next year, and then they waived him.
Hey,
sorry.
Ask Cameron your question about the 3-team deal.
Okay, so there's the 3-team deal going on in the NBA potentially that would have Russell Westbrook going to Utah, a bunch of other components, but I really wanted to focus on this aspect of it. Russell Westbrook going to Utah, probably going to be bought out, and I'm just asking the question because everybody's saying backup point guard is such a problem.
You shut your mouth, Kenny. You shut it. You shut your mouth, Kenny.
I'm just asking because I think the backup point guard is not a problem. But a lot of people don't like the fact that Davion just plays defense and doesn't score enough. So you have an opportunity to go get a backup point guard that scores pretty much exclusively. Russell Westbrook to Sacramento. Your thoughts?
No. No. You know, like there's a reason to. There are players out there that like they don't want to admit when they've lost part of their fastball, right? And Russ still thinks he can put up all the stats, and he can still put up all the stats, but what he can't do is put up all the stats and win. And it's really tough because, you know, you look at his shooting percentages and everything else, and you're like, hey, they're not that bad. You watch him play one time, and you're just like flabbergasted. Like there are so many times where it's crazy. You're watching things that you never thought you'd watch on a basketball court while someone's getting stats. So the reason why I say no is because you bring him in and he says, yes, I just want to be here. I just want to win. I'm only here to focus on that. I don't care what my role is. Behind the scenes on day 2, he's asking for 35 minutes. And it's just, he's not at the point in his career where he has accepted who he is and what's left of his game, if that makes sense. So, like, I think one of the best, like, it's horrible what happened to Carmelo, right? Carmelo should not have been out of the league for as long as he was. But when he came back to the league, Carmelo knew exactly what it was that was going to keep him in the league any longer. And that was be a bench scorer, be a, you know, like a exciting player off the bench, play your role, and that's it. He wasn't sitting there pining to start or to play 30 plus minutes. And I just don't think Russ is to that point yet in his career.
I'm just asking the question. I wouldn't do it because I like the backup point guard the Kings have. I don't think that's a hole in the roster. But all week, people have been talking about how, it's a big hole. Well, you can get Russell Westbrook and get the scoring that you're looking for.
James answered exactly as I predicted he would. The only thing you didn't do was I thought you would personally destroy him a little bit more than you actually did. So that went about as well as I was expected when KC first brought that up, and we had the idea like, hey, why don't you ask James that and see how it goes? The fact that you didn't even let him get the question out.
Yeah,
That's what we thought. That's exactly.
Yeah, just pull the e-brake, just like,
yeah, that's exactly what we expected.
Yep.
I don't think that's going to happen. If he does, if this 3-team deal and it who knows, but if this 3-team deal does go through, and Westbrook winds up in Utah, winds up getting bought out. You brought Miami to my attention. I think that's a great look, but ultimately, I think he plays in the same exact arena, and he can go play for the Los Angeles Clippers and be a huge help for a team that is surging right now, winning 8 of their last 10. James, we'll talk about the Western Conference with you when we return, what the next 21 hours might look like, and, of course, the Kings and the Rockets tonight. We'll do all that when we return with our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham, here along with D'Lo and KC on Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320. Clear. Okay.
I didn't even realize they had 2 trade exceptions.
I didn't either.
I think I went through it once or twice, but it's like the finer nuances of the cap. It's really complicated, and
the other one's like 4.3 or something like that, or 4.1.
No, it's like 4.02, and the problem is trade exceptions. You're only allowed to go 100,000 over, so that's why a player like Alex Len, where you can go 25% over, versus a trade exception where you're only allowed to go 100,000 over. So unfortunately for the Kings, like Darius Baisley, Matisse Thybulle, I don't know, even I think Jared Vanderbilt, they all come in at a little bit over, like 4.2, 4.3. The exception isn't big enough to pull those guys. You can't trade that for whatever. So, like, in a perfect world, the Kings could use that exception, go out and trade it, say, for Darius Baisley, and you give up a second-round pick. And it wouldn't even be one of your great second-round picks, I wouldn't expect. But because he makes a little bit over, you can't actually use the exception on him. You'd have to use a player. And even like a $2.6 million player, I think comes really, really close to a $4 million player. Even like I did the math, and if you took Alex Len at 3.9 million and you traded him for Thibault, you could trade him for Thibault and Springer. And again, Thibault's at like 4.3 million and Springer's at like 2 point something, right? You can actually make that deal per the salary cap, where you couldn't do it with a trade exception for sure. But that might be enough to save the Sixers like $2.4 million and get them under the cap and get them under the luxury tax. And so that would be a deal where they would have to consider something like that, especially if you threw in a second round or a second, probably just one in a deal like that. Anyway,
Doesn't it feel like in the grand scheme of things, when people talk about, oh, that's a bad deal, can't sign this guy to this deal, it's too much money, it's this and that, yada yada yada. It seemed like worst come to worst, you can always get off a contract.
yeah,
I haven't found a situation yet where they're like, man, there's this money that we just can't move. We can't trade this guy. Like you can always get off a contract.
well, you can, but you have to be willing to take back equally bad contracts, or you have to be willing to take back like a whole bunch of money. So like I think the Kings are shopping. Well, I know the Kings have been shopping Richaun Holmes for a while, right? I can definitively tell you they have been shopping Richaun Holmes for a while. The problem that you have is Holmes is owed one more year at like 12.2, and then he has a player option at like 12.5 the year after that. He's not going to opt out of those deals. There's just no way. He's already 29 years old. He's not going to make that money back. So trading a player with 2 years at 25 million left after this year is really difficult to do if we're talking about, trading him for Josh Richardson and you go get like a player on an expiring contract. Like the Spurs have no incentive to do that deal. Why would they take on an additional 12.5 million for a player who may or may not play for them, right? But if we go back and revisit a trade like John Collins, where you're trading for a player who's owed 80 million over the next 3 years, something like that, then you can stick a guy like Richaun Holmes in a deal like that. Because even if they are saving money, like if they're trying to dump salary, they're never going to find a taker who just gives up $25 million in expiring contracts and takes nothing back. So Atlanta would, like in that situation, they would have to at least consider taking on Holmes's 2 years. So yeah, there are contracts that seem untradeable that aren't, but it's got to be in the right situation.
Hey, I'm watching Texas versus Kansas women's basketball, and man, I really wish I could see what happened in this game. Look at what happened at halftime. Nah, I need to know what happened there.
No.
Are those
grannies?
Oh, I was gonna say, are those older
Those
ladies playing ball? Oh my!
I need to know. I need to watch.
Who got the buckets?
They need to put that on ESPN Plus. I'd watch that.
Who got the buckets?
The grannies out there playing it.
I was not getting trade info right there while I was on my phone.
Forgot to tell James we're back. James, we're back.
We're back.
Oh, it's live, pal.
Sweet.
I got a question for him, because we talked about a little bit before the break about the Tyrese Halliburton trade exception that expires today. He explained it a little more in depth over during the break on the stream. But I'll ask you this, Sam, because there's a lot of people saying it in the chat. Would you consider it a failure if they didn't use this trade exception? Like, do they have to like use this at all costs?
No, no. And I say no because they have other players that are around that salary range that they're trying to shop as well. So like the problem with exceptions is you can't like take a $4 million exception and a $4 million player and trade for an $8 million player. That's not the way it works. Now there is ways to trade an exception in a multiplayer deal, but again, it becomes really complex. You know, and for me to break that down, I'd need like a whiteboard and like sit here and show you like the finer nuances of it. But exceptions, they're really like a coupon, and like you have 1 year to use the coupon, and it's what's ever left over from what's called in the NBA a non-simultaneous trade. So you can do trades that literally last a year and have moving pieces that last a year. And so one trade, like, and if you looked at the trade that they got the Marvin Bagley trade exception from, like that is one of the more complex trades. Like how they pulled that off while making the Sabonis trade is wild. Like there are 4 teams, there are players going all over the place. Marvin goes to Detroit. The Kings get Trey Lyles from Detroit, but they got Dante DiVincenzo from the Bucks. Serge Ibaka goes from the Clippers to the Bucks. Like it's super complex, and that's just like the basic players. Then when we look into the trade itself, how complex it was outside of just the 4 teams moving players around to match salaries, to get like the trade exceptions that happen, all that stuff. It's really, really difficult to like map out without having like a giant spreadsheet and show you how all of these pieces move together. But yeah, the Kings have that deal. I would say this: when the Kings traded Isaiah Thomas, who basically they did a sign and trade with Isaiah Thomas to the Phoenix Suns, and they got a $7 million trade exception and the draft rights to Alex Oriaki, which they still own the rights to. They could trade him in one of these other deals going in the next 24 hours. But when they did that deal, the Kings should have used that $7 million trade exception, because $7 million at that point, when the salary cap is 70 or 80 million bucks, that was a huge, huge trade exception. A $4 million trade exception when the salary cap is 122 million, it's really nothing. And it's hard to fit. Only a certain amount of players fit into that. Again, the Kessler Edwards could have fit into that exception as well, but they didn't need to use it on that one. So I think we'll see. We'll see how they structured that deal. We still don't even know all the specifics, but they likely used the Marvin Bagley exception.
How much money does James Wiseman make?
$9 million.
Doesn't fit.
Yeah, you can't.
Fit. You must have quit. Doesn't fit. Remember, we don't think anything's going to happen in the next 21 hours. Do you? Kenny and I were talking about this earlier. I don't know how much is going to happen across the league. And clearly, I don't believe a bigger deal is going to be made than the one that we already saw involving the Dallas Mavericks and the Brooklyn Nets. But I don't know. I don't even know if this 3-team deal that they've been talking about is going to happen with the Lakers, T-Wolves, and Jazz. Maybe it does. But as far as the Kings, James, I don't think much is going to happen.
I think it depends on what you look at as much. I do think that they will make a move or two between now and tomorrow at noon. Whether that deal is something that really moves the needle for anyone, that's yet to be established. We need to see what it looks like before we actually, go at them for not doing anything at this point. But when you look around the league and the Dallas Mavericks are right behind you in the standings, a game or two back, and they go out and they get Kyrie Irving, and then you're looking at the Los Angeles Lakers, who are just doing everything in their power to climb back into the playoff picture, and they have a potential to not only already add Rui Hachimura, but go get Jared Vanderbilt, go get D'Angelo Russell, go get Malik Beasley. Like, literally between those two trades, they just swapped out 4 of their top 8 and got better, way better, way better than they were before. And if you're the Kings and you're looking at that, you got to start thinking like, hey, look, this is an arms race and we need to get involved. And we don't need to be stupid and we don't need to swing for the fences, but our players have done enough to earn upgrades. And that's how I look at it. Like some people think, oh, well, that's such a bummer. Player X got cut or player X got traded to, a bad situation and he might get waived there or whatever. You can think of it that way. But I always look at it the other way, that the top 7 guys, maybe 8 guys on this roster have done a really, really exceptional job this season. They need help. And you know what help they need. And I keep equating it to baseball, but really it's like, go get me a back end of the order bat. Go get me a couple of setup guys. Go get me a 5th starter. It doesn't have to be an ace. It doesn't have to be a 3-hole hitter, but go get something that actually helps these guys and fills the voids that everyone in the world can see is wrong with this team. Like if you can't see what's wrong with this team, the areas that need improvement, then you're just not watching closely enough. And they need help. They need backup center help. They need more length at the 3 and the 4. They need a rim protector. They need 3-and-D players. They need better defensive players overall. And lastly, they need more talent. They got to a certain point with talent. They need more. Like you go up against the Boston Celtics and you instantly see the talent difference between the two teams. There's a few ways that you can do that in one huge fail swoop, but it's really hard to break everything up. Just improving the 7, 8, 9, 10 guy on the roster, that will help the talent base of this team.
So let me ask you this, and I don't disagree with some of the holes you're talking about, but say they don't make a move. Are they not when people say that, I feel like they feel like this team isn't really a 7 games over 500 team. They're playing above their head right now. You feel that way about the Kings?
No. Okay, so I would make the distinction that I think some people might get confused by. I think the Kings are probably, the way they've played, they're a legitimate 7 games over 500 team. Maybe even 8 after tonight. We'll see. But I think that that's who they are. But there's a big difference between a 7 or 8 game over 500 team and a 3rd seed. Because that's where I start getting to, historically speaking, 3rd seeds never win 46 or 47 games. That's, again, sometimes the 8th seed wins 46, 47, 48 games. So this year is just off. The numbers are off. The win totals are off. I think the Kings are a 7 game over 500 team, but I don't think that they're a 3rd seed. And and that's just because, again, in any other year they wouldn't be. And they have to be cognizant of that. If they're a team that's more of an 8 games over 500 team, there's nothing wrong with that. But 8 wins over 500 is 44 or 45, and that's a 45 win team, 46 win team, right? If they're a 600 win percentage team, well, that's more wins. And to me, they're a games over 500 team, not a win percentage that will hold up through an 82 game season team.
Interesting.
To be a 3 seed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just being realistic. Fans should, you should be excited about your team. And there's a possibility that this season just works out where somehow the 3rd seed is 47 wins, but it really hasn't happened at all. That's just not the way either conference goes. That's, a 3rd seed needs to be at 53, 54 wins typically.
No,
And
you're right.
And that's where the Kings need to take a giant step up in the standings. And again, you get done with this 7 game road trip, the schedule gets tougher down the stretch. It does.
Typically, that's on the card.
There it is. James Ham Bingo's on point today.
Oh, did I say the stretch?
We knew you were going to bring up the schedule. We knew you were going to bring up the schedule and how it gets tougher. We knew you were going to shoot down Russell Westbrook too.
Ham
I'm here for it.
Ham is correct though with the 3 seed thing, and he's spot on. That's usually like
Yeah, I was
it's
anxious to
like
prove him
12,
wrong, but I
15
couldn't find
games over
anything.
500 or something
Yeah.
like that. But like 6,
That's not
7,
there.
that's usually there's a drop off between 3 and 4,
Mm-hmm.
and I've looked in a couple of different years. It's usually like from 4 to 7 is
Mhm.
like 7 or 8 games over 500. And
Didn't the Suns win 48 games one year and they were the 9th seed and didn't make the playoffs? Under Jeff Hornacek.
That was I feel like that was a while ago. I don't think that was necessarily recently. I think it was probably 10 plus years ago.
One of the things with that though too, when those things happen, that was with a completely imbalanced league talent wise, right? Like Western Conference teams were feasting on Eastern Conference teams because the East was so bad. So that helped add to the win total, right? Because one conference was so much inferior than the other. Now they're a little more balanced out. Some would even say the East might be a little better. Mm-hmm. So typically, like Ham said, you get a 3 seed it's not 7 games over 500.
Yeah, that was the 2013-14 season. Yeah.
I mean, 48 games, they didn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I know a team like the other day, like 2 years ago, won 47 games and was the 3rd seed. But again, that was in a 72 game season, not an 82 game season. And if you're winning that many games, your win percentage is probably like 620. So you would have won an additional 6 games, and again, 53 wins.
Is the overall concern here, Hammer? I know you were talking about adding more talent and what the top 8 guys have earned, but as part of the concern headed into to tomorrow's trade deadline, if you don't make a deal, if you don't add to the depth of that roster, the amount of strain you're putting on those top 8 guys for the remaining at tomorrow's point, it'll be 28 games left in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, how I look at it is like Mike Brown has done his best to like whittle a couple of square pegs and try to jam them through round holes, right? And if you give him a little bit more time, that might be something that someone is thinking. If we just give him a little bit more time, maybe he can convert this player. Maybe he can keep growing this player. That usually doesn't happen. It just like we've got to a point where players for this season are who they are. Now, if they go into the off season and they have more, time to adjust and grow and, really attack certain portions of their game, that's one thing. But like this roster is who they are for the rest of the season as of right now, unless you make changes. And that's like, is it good enough? And you have to wonder. I mean, and it comes down to situations like when Fox misses 2 games and you just don't look like yourself at all. Or when Sabonis picks up early fouls and your offense can't function. Like there are ways to address these situations. And I'm not saying like trade Davion, but what I am saying is that like if you could get another option as a shooting guard or as a small forward that could play alongside Malik Monk and allow Malik Monk to play more point guard during stretches and have someone else defensively alongside him, that could give you a different look than what you have right now. And like Keon Ellis might be able to be that player in 2 years or a year, but Matisse Thybulle might be that player right now where you could throw him out there and say, okay, look, we need you to have Malik Monk's back and we need you to run an off-ball shooting guard or a 3, and we're going to play Monk a lot more minutes at the 1. And to me, those are things that actually make sense for this team. And whether or not you can go get those players, or the same thing, like it's why I bring up Mason Plumlee all the time. It's not that I think Mason Plumlee is a genius of a player, and someone even brought up in the comment section on the King's Beat podcast, hey, I think I like Jakob Poeltl better. Like Jakob Poeltl, yes, he's a better player, and he will be better 3 years from now, and he's 25, and he's got room to grow and get better. The Kings don't need a 30-something minute a game center. They need someone who understands their role, can step in and be a really good player for you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And that's what a guy like Mason Plumlee can be. He's never going to be Poeltl, but Poeltl also can't really at this point fill that role. Plus, he's going to cost you 2 or 3 first-round picks, and he wants $20 million in the offseason. where you can go get a guy like Mason Plumlee for expiring contracts and a second-round pick, most likely, and really bolster the depth of your team with a player who understands the offense, who played for Jay Triano last year in the same exact offense, playing the center position. So like that's why I look at guys like that and I circle them. I'm gonna go, okay, look, if you could get this player, he could really impact your bottom line this year. He's not going to be the difference between you winning, 46, 47, and 58 wins because there's not enough time for that. But what he could be is a guy who makes a huge difference in like 2 or 3 games in your win total. But on top of that, if you have a major injury, your season isn't over. Because as of right now, if they have a major injury with Domantas Sabonis, their season is over. And there isn't a plan B at this point outside of hope that Rashawn Holmes can figure out how to play with the offense long enough for you not to completely fall out of the playoffs. And so those are where like I look at opportunities for this team to improve without swinging for the fences and going get it and getting OG Anunoby and giving up 2 or 3 first round picks. And in addition to that, calling Atlanta and just taking off pick control over, the Herter trade pick and like really just throwing all caution to the wind here. Like there are ways to improve this team by enough that will change how strong of a 3 seed or how strong of a 4 seed you are.
Hey, Ham, as far as the game on Wednesday and the game on Monday and the game tonight on Wednesday, what did you think of the Kings' win on Monday against the Rockets? And what do you see for them tonight, man? Is it more of the same here tonight? Or, I think
Keegan Murray's hitting 9 threes tonight.
There you go, 9 threes.
9.
Me and Damian feel like they should win tonight, but we also got our antennas up to see how the Rockets respond to Steven Silas and what he said after the post game. They may come out with a little more juice. What you thinking about tonight?
Yeah, I mean that would be my concern is that Steven Silas like had enough, and I don't know why he hadn't had enough like 25 games ago, because I know a lot of people around the league just feel bad for him because he's in that situation.
Supposed to do.
Yeah. So when you're able to show people stuff on film and say, what were you doing? Tell me. You go ahead and tell me what you were doing on this play. And when they don't have an answer and you just roast them and just like throw flames, like, look, that's a young team. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. The Kings turn up the defensive pressure. They make the mistakes. The Kings take advantage. That's what a more veteran, like solid team does. Whether they can do it twice in a row or for the 4th time this season, yeah, they probably can. But if I'm Steven Silas and I want to prove a point and I want to say, like, this is why we won't lose tonight, then he has to do something crazy, outlandish, like play Eric Gordon 35 minutes, play KJ Martin, who the Kings don't have an answer for. They don't have an answer for either one of those two. So if Steven Silas actually wants to practice what he preaches, which is play hard the whole time, he needs to coach hard the whole time. And he needs to play players that actually give you a chance to win. And that's where he's in a dilemma. Is it about wins or is it about like growing, or what is it about this season for the Rockets? And it's not about wins. So I don't think he will play the players that will help him win. And we'll just have to see how it goes. I mean, the Kings are a more talented team from top to bottom. They're a more experienced team. They should beat them.
I think the Kings got some responding to do too. I don't think we called them out publicly, but privately, I'm very confident Mike mentioned, hey, you gave up 70 points in the second half to a 13-win team. Let's not do that tonight. And not only did you give up 70 points in the second half, and there's a little bit of a flow to the game that kind of goes with that, but not only did you give up 70 points in the second half, you only gave up like 48, 50 or something like that in the first. Mm-hmm. So you really let your foot off the defensive gas here, and Mike's got to bring that in. I think Mike is going to put that intensity back in them on the defensive end.
Yeah, and I think De'Aaron Fox is ready to have a really solid game. He's from Houston. It'll be like broadcast to all of his friends and family. So yeah, I expect him to have a really nice night tonight. And he's a new father. He's probably exhausted. He's been, at the hospital or at a parent's house out there in Houston, like watching over a newborn every day, and that's nerve wracking. So I expect him to come out and play a little bit with a little bit more energy. Yeah, you feel that, don't you, Kenny?
That first month is crazy.
I can't even imagine it. Like, I would be looking at these. I'm responsible for you. Like, I don't think I could do this. It's just why I don't have kids. I'm just like, I'm responsible for everything that happens to you. If Monday's game was at home, would you have called De'Aaron Fox daddy?
No.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure Jordy make that mistake, and I don't think Jordy's going to make that mistake again, because apparently that locker room is as mature as the Chatty House.
We are two hosts.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
We had a good laugh out of that Jordy video.
Hey, James, another thing I want to ask you. On Friday, can you ask Jason Kidd who we voted for the All-Star game? No, don't do that. I'm not putting James in that position.
We're gonna figure out who voted for Jaren Jackson Jr. and all of these All-Stars. Hey, submit your list to us, kid. Let's see who did you have?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Oh,
if they actually did that.
Every coach that comes through here, I need you to answer that question.
It would be.
And if you voted for Jaren, you're entitled to your opinion. I need you to explain why you think he should have made it over De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
3.7 million people tuned in at 11:45 Eastern last night to watch LeBron James set the all-time record. James wasn't one of them.
James said not